welcome to Classics Confidential. I'm Anastasia and I'm talking with Rachel here at the Euro Museum at the University of Reading. So Rachel, you're working on this project about inscriptions in Egypt. Would you like to tell us how you got involved in that?
Sure. The project that I've been working with is an AHRC funded project based mostly at Oxford, but with my participation from Reading, called the Corpus of Ptolemaic Inscriptions Project. And this is headed by Alan Bowman and Simon Hornblower and Charles Crowther. My role in the project, which is gathering together and forming new editions and translations of inscriptions from Egypt from the very late 4th century BC to the death of Cleopatra VII in 30 BC, my role in the project is to look mostly at the bilingual and trilingual inscriptions. So things not just in the Greek language, which was the language of the new Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, but the Egyptian languages which were used by the vast majority of the population, whether that's in the Demotic script, which is the everyday script that people might actually have written personal documents in, or hieroglyphic Egyptian, which is still used for ceremonial purposes.
Would you like to give us an example of an interesting inscription that you've been working on?
I think the one that most people will have heard of is the Rosetta Stone.
Of course.
Which, of course, is in the British Museum. It's very, very famous for its role in the decipherment of hieroglyphs in the early 19th century. In a lot of ways, as an inscription, the Rosetta Stone is quite boring. It's a Ptolemaic priestly decree. If you want to read stuff about how the king was generous to the temples and the temples accorded him honours in return, then the text in the Rosetta Stone is really your thing. It's part of a collection of trilingual priestly decrees called the Decrees of Memphis and Canopus and some other places. And what's interesting about it, one of the many things that's interesting about it, is the fact that we get this description of the king from a Greek perspective and also from an Egyptian perspective as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. Of course, it's also very interesting to learn a little bit more about what life was really like for, shall we say, more ordinary people than the pharaohs.
Well, that's the question, really, isn't it? We've got the project, the texts that are being worked on are everything from the formal trilingual priestly decrees. There are Greek inscriptions for public purposes, but we also get smaller texts as well, and quite often when people are using both the Greek and the Egyptian language in text, you get slightly different information presented in each, which tells you a lot about the different ways in which people construct their culture and their identity through the use of different languages.
It's fascinating because, of course, we always associate classical antiquity with Greek and Latin, the sort of the dominant languages, and unfortunately Egyptian from that period tends to sort of fade a little bit into the background.
Well, it does from a classical perspective. My view on this is, well, my initial training at university was as an Egyptian philologist, so I've only, although I had Latin and Greek, only really come over to the dark classical side relatively recently in my career. And it is something I think a lot of people find shocking or surprising about classical antiquity is when they discover how multilingual and multicultural the ancient Greek and Roman worlds were. It's something that especially people from the Anglophone world often have difficulty getting their heads around as well. The fact that only speaking one language is weird and it's unusual. And if you're looking at somewhere like Ptolemaic Egypt, there are multiple languages, not just Greek and Egyptian, which are being used in communities, in everyday life, in the market, in all sorts of places. So this is not a monocultural, monolingual world at all.
Which of course has applications in today's multicultural world. So can you tell us a bit about some of the pedagogical uses to which these inscriptions can be put?
Well, probably the most fundamental thing that I use, well, I teach a course on Hellenistic history at the minute, and one of the most fundamental points that I try to make by showing things like the Rosetta Stone and trilingual inscriptions is exactly what we've just been talking about, the fact that this is not some culturally and linguistically uniform place. And in a lot of ways, our stereotypical standard ways of looking at the classical world have been very much dictated by modern European colonialism. The fact that we're used to looking at Asian and African cultures and languages as being something that doesn't have anything to do with the ancient Greeks and Romans. Whereas if you look at the geographical extent of the Hellenistic kingdoms, for example, you've got interaction between Greeks and Greek language and culture, and communities and cultures everywhere from Egypt to what's now northern Afghanistan. So I think the point about diversity is really one of the most fundamental ones which can be communicated to students through things such as this.
Now, it would have been wonderful to be able to be in a Hellenistic city and listen to all the different languages being spoken around you. Well, it's a fascinating project. Thank you very much, Rachel, for talking to us.
It's been great talking to you.